Welcome to the J.R. Hendrick Texan Gentleman, the podcast that deals with the early life of J.R. Hendrick. And now, narrating J.R. Hendrick Back to School, Jimmy and J.R. We're going to go ahead and start on the 28th of August. This is as far back as we can. "1:15 p.m. Gone back to the dorm after church at the Holy Spirit Club. I was sitting there trying to decide what I wanted for lunch. They had soup for lunch at the club, and I wanted something else. Charlie was sleeping and snoring away. Idiot played couch potato over at Coleman Hall to chase skirts. But the good news is I know what to do. 1:20 p.m. Meanwhile, sitting by the pool, his father is dismayed but glad. Dismayed that Blake Carter returned to Washington, D.C. after only 10 days. Glad because Dexter and Viviana left to return to Wills Point. Dexter was genial, however, Viviana was deleterious to Betsy's psyche when it came to her mother, Grandma Elizabeth. 2:15 p.m. Just out of the blue, Grandma Mary showed up with some fried chicken for lunch. Carl told me everything, Junior. I'm glad you had a good internship there in Washington, D.C. But as far as your daddy, D.C. ain't doing him no good. No, I'm worried about whether it's going to change Mama. But your Mama was raised around politics and politicians. Your Gramps was legislative assistant in Billings, Montana, whenever he was home. But your daddy ain't going to talk about that because don't tell me. Daddy's been telling me ever since I was knee-high that his father was such a dastard. No. Your Gramps was fearless. He walked away from us, I think, only because maybe he probably had a death wish to die for his country. 2:45 p.m. Now, Grandma had decided to go home. And Charlie, he woke up not too long ago and had gone to the ice machine at the snack bar at Smead. Kevin called to say he'd be at the library until about 4. Dinner at the club was at 5. The evening devotional was at 7. I was disappointed that Jennifer Bowers couldn't come because her grandparents were here from Fort Worth. But my old standby at the club. Sharon told me at the church service that day she'd be glad to come with me. I would have to find Jennifer after the evening to have her come visit me for just a little bit before heading back to her dorm. I'd also see to it that the shuttle got off to a good start. 4 p.m. Kevin McDonald came back and was telling us about a distant cousin of his who was petitioning to be a part of my daddy's dream team that he was going to form, especially after a little especially after some girl Daddy had connected with some of the Dixie Mafia at the casino yesterday. Nothing was serious going on, though. But Daddy was thinking about making this dream team to save egg on his face when he went after Bill Clinton. 4:30 p.m. At Mary Jane, the yellow call. It was Amy Kathleen saying that she settled into the mansion and was getting ready for her first day of classes at Ascension Hills College, namely English composition, elementary algebra, and American history. 6 p.m. Now here I was at the Holy Spirit Club having burgers and potato salad for dinner. Situated in between my date Sharon and Tom Newcastle. We talked about our courses, our extracurricular activities, and all that good stuff. And I explained why Jennifer was staying at her dorm so that her grandparents could see her. 6:50 p.m. At Mary Jane, the family sits down to dinner. Table steaks, which were a T-bone steak lightly coated in an egg batter and fried good. Jim had learned the recipe from his friend Claude, who got it from a waitress attended him at a Dixie Mafia gambling club in a little town called Lampe, Texas. Lampe. A suburb of Austin, Texas. 7 p.m. Holy Spirit Club, Sunday night devotional service. I was sitting there listening to Sister Marlena Gifford, Professor of Law at Lubbock University College. Her sermon was the Bible and the Nazarene. She used the same King James Bible that looked a lot like the Bible we had back at the ranch. 9 p.m. Now, Jennifer Bowers and I are having some ginger ale at the snack bar at Sneed Hall. 9:30 p.m. Jennifer steps into my suite for a few minutes. I gave her a hug and asked her if she was going on a date for Tuesday with me. It was the first meeting of Cheesecake Toastmasters that was to take place at the IHOP just off the Texas Tech campus. She gave me a hug and promised that she'd be ready after my classes. 3:30 a.m. At Mary Jane, Jim wakes up with a lot on his mind. He remembers how in March 1953, in March 1969, Jeremy Swain told Jim that he was a better match for his daughter to marry, even though he didn't necessarily totally approve. He currently knew that he would be a more stable match than that quote-unquote, Johnny Dustin. Johnny was always going hog wild, being clumsy or stupid, getting himself or someone else hurt. He remembers after 1969 having to use the Dixie Mafia to grab John Dustin away. In 1973, he used County Sheriff Lean Michelson to run Johnny out of town. In 1977, he used Dixie crime boss Chucky Chuckle Truman to run Johnny to Granger, Texas. 1979 was the year that Johnny really traumatized JR. Once again, Sheriff Lean Michelson issues an arrest warrant for Johnny right after he left the ranch, unless he left town within 24 hours to go to Gum Springs, Arkansas, to issue an arrest warrant for Johnny right after the ranch. Jim wanted to sick the Dixie Mafia on him again, but Jeremy Swain, still being the man of the house and seeing his grandson cry, felt that the sheriff was the more above-board idea. That fall, when he found out that Betsy was pregnant with his child, Jim's child, Christine, Jim wants to protect his son and daughter, vowed that if Johnny returned anytime soon, he would, quote-unquote, kick his behind out of town again. Little did he know, within a few months from now, Johnny would cause more problems all over again. 5:15 a.m. Eastern. Waking up, Amy Kathleen goes into the mansion chapel asking Abigail, a good morning servant, to get her some apple juice as she begins reading her Bible and devotional. Today was simply self-explanatory. English composition at 9. Elementary algebra at 11. Then lunch and return to the mansion to study at 1. 5 a.m. At the Assembly, I began my swimming practice all by myself. Coach told me that my first swim meet would be against Iowa State on September 9th. I would also have a debate team spar against Baylor University Thursday, September 8th. Thank goodness it was a home match. 9 a.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, at Ascension Hills College, Amy Kathleen is in her English composition class with Dr. Catherine Lee, Professor of English Composition and Biblical Literature. At the same time, Elizabeth Marie at Ascension Hills is going to her Law and Public Policy course under law professor Regal Philco. This man seemed to understand her view of public policy and was able to give her extra accommodations for her having bipolar disorder. 9 a.m. Central. And so after having breakfast with a good friend of mine, Antonio Gomez, and having a brief meeting with a Texas State caseworker for the blind, I'm sitting down in economics class. We're up steps, Dr. Galworthy. Alright, folks, settle down. We have a lot to cover, and time is short. You may read the syllabus on your own, but there are two types of competing economic theories: Keynesian and monetarism. So rather than sit here and debate between two theories and see which one is a failure, we're going to learn how to apply the best theory, restorational economics. But now I will tell you that this theory is not socialism or communism. No, it's capitalist to the core. What's a thesis? This is irrelevant to what we're discussing in class today. But, for your sake, let's just call it Christian theory. Christian theory, okay, I'll play. Never heard it discussed like that before, but I think I like it. Well then, let's say it's Plato. I like Plato. I'm only to bet the rest of the class don't know who he is and what he believes. Well, I do. Settle down, Junior, Kevin McDonald said. On the board, you'll see an analysis the measure of the big picture operation of economics. Importantly, we're going to be focusing on more of a free market economy. Milton Friedman, my father, when he came home from Washington, D.C., was spending part of the time at the dinner table talking about the virtues of Milton Friedman. Mr. Hendrick, we'll work on his theory later on in the term. I see it's no more than just a financial teacher. Godwither said. You will see that this course is a social science is applied to public affairs. When it comes to administrative factors and legal studies. You just whet my appetite. Explain it to me. Well, first of all, sir, it's a matter of government relations and how it ties into politics today. Then you have to communicate your theory concisely to the public. Plus, communications is important whether you're lobbying in Austin, Texas or Washington, D.C. Then, of course, it deals with the fact of a business interest. And then, of course, long-term issues like welfare reform. I learned it all when my granddad let me start my own organization at age 15, the Red Scouts. Forgive me, Mr. Hendrick. But we do have a lot of material to cover. And I understand that you grew up on the ranch. And your father and grandfather were politicians. But not everybody in this class has the knowledge that you do. But I appreciate your participation. We want to thank Mr. Hendrick for his time and his service here today. But the question is, what is economics? Economics is a study of how people behave to fulfill their needs and their wants. Meanwhile, at Mary Jane, Jim had just finished several hours of net fishing off the dock yesterday. He had caught 14 bass in a day. Yesterday. And today, he had caught 29 sauger. Now back in the mansion, Betsy made breakfast of chicken fried steak with eggs and fried potatoes. Another one of Jim's favorite breakfast and dinners. Jim remembers how, at age 16, his Uncle Jim and Aunt Gail made some prepared chicken fried steak for Easter that year to soothe the blow. Because a year before, Jim's father had walked away, cutting into his psyche. That's why, for 56 years, he walked around until the day he died calling his father a coward and a dastard. 11 a.m. And here I was, mass media theory class with Dean Settee. For 15 minutes, he goes over the syllabus. 11:15 a.m. The dean finally began his lecture. You know, a lot of people think that mass media theory is a bunch of dead ideas. But me, I count it as living. The way a person picks up a rock on a lake bed, a river bed, and calls it living. A way that Christians hold the Bible and say that it's living. The way some ideologues taught that the Constitution is living. So to that end, can someone tell me what they think is increased mood management theory in mass media? Dean Settee asked. A young girl stood up to read a part of the textbook. The process by which entertainment through consumption of mass media can manage and even improve moods. Close but no cigar, the dean said. Lots of people would like to believe that, but I was informed by my parents about a show that they grew up with. What was it? 37 or 38? Where the world, around Halloween, people were scared to death. Even young college students like you. Professor, just hold on a second. A minute. My parents raised me to believe you get out of your entertainment what you put in it. Nice to be a part of the discussion, Mr. Hendrick. Your father is right. I underestimated your intelligence. But let's see how well you play. Later on in the term, we will be discussing media enrichment theory. Can you please give me some thoughts you have on this? Some say that theory is bunk. I say the same way. What about you do? How do you see it? Okay, I'll play. Last summer, in the internship, my daddy had some interns watch this rather disgusting, subjective show called Dive Hall. It led a lot of discussion throughout the mansion. Some people are arguing whether or not sexual aggression is okay. I don't. Listen to the wheels as he thinks in his head. That's what I expect out of this class. Now, I will continue with my lecture. 1:45 p.m. Eastern. At Cornerstone Christian Academy, Chris bumps into one of her 9th grade English classmates she met today, Cliff Powers. You have a brother going to this high school with you here today? No. They're beyond high school. I'm the youngest. My brother Kyle, he runs the ranch back home in Texas. And my brother JR, he's going to school back in Texas for college. Yeah. My cousin said it looks like your brother was on TV. Some press conference. Say looked off and retarded. Christine hit him in the arm. No, he's not. He's blind. And he's a junior at college. And if you ever say anything about my big blind brother like that ever again, you're going to regret it. You've been fair warned. 1 p.m. So after mass media theories, JR goes to the main aquatic center, Texas Tech, to go for a half-hour swim. And then on the bus from the recreation center back to Holden Hall, going to Sneed Snack Bar to get a cheeseburger special lunch. Jared, I had a brief conversation with Mama, but she couldn't talk because she was in some store in Baton Rouge trying to buy some amethyst earrings. So I took a little nap at first. I listened to the Andrew House show, but everything was about the O.J. Simpson. So I taken a little nap. I listened to the King and I soundtrack that I picked up once again in Washington, D.C. In the past, I had listened to it to think of a Holly Hawthorne. Now, I was just using it to be creative about my own life. 1:15 p.m. at Mary Jane with the women shopping. Jim and Frank are cooking Angus burgers on the grill, listening to the Andrew House show. Frank, race don't matter to me, you know that. But as far as O.J. Simpson, is concerned, he's as guilty as sure as he is famous. 1:50 p.m. Central. The Andrew House show is over and I'm lying down, not knowing what to do. I just continue to take my nap. 5 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., Amy, Kathleen, and Forever begged Christine to stay for dinner tonight so they could entertain some guests. Christine tersely informs them that she's going out with Jennifer's parents and some friends for her first night after high school. 5:30 p.m. Central. Grandma Mary is in JR's living room in the suite at Gordon Hall. They're having pizza for dinner when JR recounts a story that happened right after his mass media theory class. These 5 idiots just kept staring at her, JR said. I wouldn't know, except I heard Larry Thurman tell me all about it. Now, where he's sitting from the 4th row. So I walked over to him and I walked over to those boys and I said, boys, where are you minds? That girl just happens to be my sweet little girlfriend. But she was nicely dressed, Grandma Mary said. Well, of course. She's my girlfriend. Never had a girlfriend that is mildly nicely dressed, except for my first love, Olivia Reynolds, and I jumped her not long afterwards. Meanwhile, at Mary Jane, the family is having Angus burgers for dinner. Ellen regrets as to why she and Frank have to leave the next day, but they say they have to open up the general store as soon as they get back on Tuesday. Bessie tells Frank and Ellen that she totally understands, and she's glad that Uncle Frank and Aunt Jan are driving in from Texarkana. Frank and Jan had owned this ranch in Texarkana since 1940. And they had one son. Named Ike. Ike had married this girl in college named Calpurnia Stevens. And in 1972, they had a daughter named Lacey. They divorced not long after the daughter was born, and and because Calpurnia didn't want her because she was with Asperger's, Ike decided to raise her. 9 p.m. Eastern. Christine returns back from her dinner with Jennifer's parents and friends, Jennifer and Monica, and she so sits down to work on some of her homework in Bible class and Algebra 1. 9 p.m. At Mary Jane, the family had done some net fishing on the docks until about 8:30, when a violent thunderstorm struck Baton Rouge. On the radio, there were announcements that there were power outages in Victoria Gardens and in Brookstown. We hope you enjoy listening to the J.R. Hendrick Texan Night. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and become a part of the adventure. This is the James Hendrick Network and Empowerment Network saying until next time, get ready for the rest of the story. It's going to get a bit more interesting from here.